Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is the author of Christmas Stories, 7 original short stories. He had his first children's picture book, Me and My Shadow, released in May of 2021. And he has 2 books coming in 2022, The Book of Souls, a mystical ghost story, and its sequel, The Book of Demons. Think Harry Potter meets The Exorcist. The Book of Souls is his first full-length novel. He considers this a self-help book based on a true event, which just happens to be a paranormal thriller. Could that description be any more intriguing? He had his play, Conversations from the Sports Arena, performed at the HBO Theater in Hollywood. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Kevin Moore.
Nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
We're glad to have you with us. And our first question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
You know, you and I were talking a little earlier about going to our class reunion, and I had a really good friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a long time at my 40th, which was a few years ago. And she said, you always said you wanted to write a novel. And I think I always did, but I didn't quite have exactly what I wanted to say until I happened to be over 50. And, I had written a couple of short stories. I had done a Christmas book of short stories, but the novel is it was a little daunting because it's a novel. And I had an event happen to me where my son, well, first of all, let me just say I'm a lucid dreamer. And I have always been a lucid dreamer since I was a kid, where sometimes I connect with people that are on the other side. And I never realized what it was until much later in life. And I started to take some courses on lucid dreaming. And they would always say, if somebody comes, try and remember in your dream when you realize that you're in a dream to ask questions. And then I had a dream, and it was a recurring dream. It happened like 3 or 4 times where these shadows were coming and they were trying to get my son, Matthew, who was in his early 20s. Now, Matthew's had health issues his entire life. And I kept saying to them, what do you want? And they would say, we want him. And I was like, well, you can't have him. And so about a month after those dreams, he got very sick, ended up in ICU, and we almost lost him. But while we were in ICU, I was like, oh, this was a sort of like a ringing of the bell, like in my dreams, like you have to be here to fight. And so Matt and I, that's why I say it's like a self-help book, because it's about fear. Because when you have a sick child or a sick spouse, your whole life is filled with fear of them getting sick, right? And then it happened. And so I would sleep with him in the hospital every night. And my wife would stay with him during the day. And I just felt like him and I were like we knew what was at stake. And so I had this, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to write this as a short story. And then my wife said, no, I think you need to turn this into a novel. And so, of course, fiction came into it then, and I brought into my childhood, New York, I live in Los Angeles now for years. And that's why it took so long, because I felt like I really had to put this on paper. I really had to tell this story. But I also think, I'm sure you feel this way too, right? It's like things come to you. It's like life. If you're not constantly looking, like you just kind of open yourself up to it, things will come. And I felt like this came not the way I would have liked it to come, but then sitting down and writing the novel and falling in love with the characters was like really a treat for me. Like I'm one of those people that wake up at 3:00 in the morning, and I used to just slide downstairs, go in my office, and start working with them. So that's a long way of saying that's why I waited so long, because I felt like I really had to get it out, to say it. Even if I would have written it and stuck it in the drawer, I felt like I had to do it.
Well, lucid dreaming is a new concept for me, so I'm going to have to look that up after our meeting today and figure that out. It sounds fascinating. But after you wrote this first children's book, then you have 2 books that are releasing this year. So that's quite an accomplishment in 1 year.
So the Book of Souls, which came out on March 8th, I originally wrote, I didn't really think I could write a novel. I was like, I'm not going to be able to fill, 350 pages, 300 pages, what have you. And so I just jumped in. And as you know, as a newbie, I was like writing some stuff that, as you well know, writing, you've written 2 books, right? You have to start cutting after you put everything down. And I went to this editor, this professional editor, Marcia, and her and I hit it off, and she read it and she goes, "You really got something here, but it's not 1 book, it's 2 books. So now we have to separate them." So the Book of Souls is a story about Jack Kelly, and so is the Book of Demons. It's the continuation, but they stand on their own, but it's the continuation. So it's the sequel to the Book of Souls. And that comes out on October 11th, right before Halloween.
Well,
and right before my daughter gets married.
Oh, my.
More importantly.
That's going to be a big celebration month for you.
Yeah.
Is there going to be a 3rd in the series?
Well, I didn't think so, because I don't know about you, but I loved this, like talking about the book. I loved writing the book. But it's like, what I realize is, it's taken me to in my 50s to understand that it's about the journey, not the goal. And the goal, I mean, of course I want to sell books. Of course I want readers to find the book, to find the story, because I love the characters. But that part of it is of like looking at numbers and trying to deal with marketing and how do you advertise and stuff like that. That's probably the least amount of fun. Like, I like talking to people about it. Like, I was so happy when you invited me to this, and I've done a few podcasts and interviews, and that's fun. So I didn't think I was going to write another part of this book, but then my lucid dreaming showed up, and Jack Kelly has showed up in 3 dreams now, and he's given me a storyline. So I'm writing notes.
Always be open, especially to those who are talking to you in your dreams.
True. I like that.
Have you ever taken the Nanowrimo challenge?
No.
It is National Novel Writing Month. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who take this challenge every November. And I took it for the first time last year in November. And I thought, there is no way I can do this, because you have to take the challenge that you're going to write 50,000 words in the month of November. Well, that's 1,667 words a day. No matter what else is going on in your life, you're writing 1,667 words a day. And it was quite the challenge, because I was, and I'm an English major, so I would write a chapter and edit a chapter and then go back and edit it again. And, it took me forever to write the first book. But in November, I wrote 50,000 words, which is within, 30,000 of having your novel. So it was quite fun. And I thought maybe if you had two coming out at the same time, maybe you had taken the Nanowrimo challenge.
I didn't. I never even heard of it, but I like that. It sounds intimidating. It's interesting because you said you're an English major, and that's another thing. Like you said, why did you wait so long? Well, I was one of those kids. I always I daydreamed. I'd be in school, which is, there's a lot of that in the book because I really did go to that school epiphany and I really did have that building across the street. Unfortunately, it wasn't the ghost of Casper Greenstreet that I was watching, but so I always had an active imagination, but I always had trouble with spelling. So I always found, now we have all of those things, but which is why I love thesauruses and dictionaries, because I used to like to sit down and when I would write something, then go, okay, let me look through the thesaurus and let me look through. Mm-hmm. So that was always one of those things too. Like I could tell a story, like I could image a story, but to write it and to not have to worry so much about spelling and grammar because there's editors.
Yes. Lots of editors.
Yeah. And it gives you some freedom,
Yes. Well, tell us about the publishing journey for you.
Okay. So after I had written the book, I got an editor. And then I decided I had two different editors on the books because now I had two different books. And so I was like, okay, I want them to both stand on their own. And then I was like, I want to go, because years ago I worked for an independent film producer when I was in my 20s. So I liked stories. I messed around with screenplays but there's, what they call the gatekeepers. And, I thought about it and I was like, how many people are going to want a new writer that happens to be 60? Who wants a new old man writer in this age? And so I was talking to an agent and they kept, telling me, okay, well, maybe we can change this. Maybe we can change this. Let's do this. Let's do that. And I just thought, I'm not going to sit here for 2 years waiting. We don't have to do that anymore.
No.
And so I found Book Forward and I found Book Flair and I, made sure I had really good editors. And I was like, I'm going to do this myself because I'm not going to wait, And I think that's one of the things when we see, as you get a little older, you see the hourglass and the sand and you're like, okay, how am I going to do my time? My time is going to be, I'm not going to wait for somebody to tell me we need this, but I don't like the title of your book. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to change your ghost to being a female. Oh, you know what I mean? And I just was like, no, I'm not going to do it. So I decided to go with Book Flair and Book Forward and myself. So I had a lot of choices and decisions. And I could say, because years ago I had a game show that was being tested and it was called The Blame Game. And you have to sign a contract and they were testing it over at CBS and places. And I had no power, no say. And they literally took the energy and what the game was about out. And I was like, I'm not going to have that done to this book without the traditional. I didn't even submit it to a publishing house.
It's so nice these days to have the options that we have,
yes.
that never before would be like that. And I felt the same way as you. I just thought the clock is ticking and I don't have years to sit around and wait and I'm going to find a partner, and I found a small micro press and it's just turned out great.
Oh, that's great. See, that's what I love that. And I think that's the same thing in the music world now. And it's like, and I didn't want people to look especially in the publishing houses, if they're looking and they're going, okay, he's 60, he's old, he's a man. Like,
how
do
many
we
books?
need another one of those?
Yeah. How many books can we, expect from him in the future?
Yeah.
That's what
And
they're
how many will
looking for.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about, that authors don't always like to put themselves out there and to tout their own work, and marketing is difficult for a lot of writers. Do you have what actually worked for you and what didn't work?
As far as marketing, because we're really just getting started. This book just came out on March 8th, so I guess it's been out 3 weeks today. And we've gotten some good reviews, and I was really happy that I hired a public relations team that specializes in publishing and works with a lot of, I won't say a lot of self-publishers, but self-publishers. So they were like able to guide me. And I just was like, I'm going, full speed. Like, I'm not gonna, like the Christmas stories, that was sort of a fluke for me because my brother had passed away this was way back he was in his 30s, and so was I was younger than him. And I was so depressed, and I tried to get myself out of the depression. And I would, at lunchtime, because I was running an office, I would sit in my office and eat and write a Christmas story. But I actually got a literary agent at that time, and they sent to this publishing house, and the guy who read it said, I really like the stories, but they're very lachrymose. And I was like, well, and he was like, and I was like, I'm not writing a Hallmark. Not that that's a bad thing, but these were real stories. They were, and so I put that away for like 20 years. And then I went back, polished it up, and just put it out as a self-published book without knowing anything, without doing any advertising, without knowing anything. And this time I was like, I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to find somebody to help me. And I'm going to believe in it,
Well, your body of work already is quite diverse, from Christmas stories in a children's book to ghost stories and plays. How do you dispel the myth that always tells us to write in the same genre?
Well, interestingly enough, I don't know, because I just think, well, right? Like, I think when we hit a certain age, we know we're not a one note. Our whole life has not been one note. Like, I grew up in New York City in the tenements and the projects, right? My mom died. We moved to New Jersey, and within a year, my mother died of breast cancer in the 70s. Our whole life blew up, right? I moved out to California. Well, I started paying my own rent when I was 18. A different note. I moved out to California when I was 19 and talked to my girlfriend and said, please come to California, and, we're still together from then, completely different note. Then I had a child, my first child. I didn't know if I ever wanted children, because not that I didn't want them. I just was like, I don't want to mess anybody up, And then we had this beautiful boy, and he had so many health problems, and he just turned 32 last month. But we were told in the delivery room to kiss him goodbye because he wouldn't even make it downstairs. Another note. So I just think life, if you, like you said earlier, right, if you open yourself up to things, you're going to have a lot of different things to say, And then in my 50s, my 40s, I got into yoga. And then in my 50s, I got really into yoga, got into Reiki, which is a healing, and being a devout, I grew up very Catholic. So putting all of those things together, completely different life, like in the places that I would giggle at myself and I would say, you're going to be a yoga teacher, Kev, at 59, it's just.
And in some very unique places. Tell us about where you volunteer your time.
Well, I used to. The pandemic ended that, but I was doing yoga on Mondays at a place called Hope of the Valley. And it is it's a homeless shelter. They would have lunch on those days and different things. And the man there, Jonathan, wanted to offer, I went there with my wife and my daughter. We would do some, we would serve the lunches. And then this guy, Jonathan, was saying, oh yeah, I'm kind of looking for a yoga teacher. And I said, well, I am actually a yoga teacher. And so I started doing that. And of course, we did more meditation than yoga because a lot of them had a lot of health issues. And it didn't last that long because I did it for about 9 months, and then the pandemic started and everything ended. And it was the same thing with the Reiki. Like we used to do a healing group every Monday nights, and then we were going to work at this place for young people who had psychological issues and drug rehabilitation issues. They were getting ready to hire me. The pandemic started. So that flipped that thing. And then I started to write, concentrate on writing the book during the pandemic and getting it ready for showtime, or prime time.
Kevin, you're a very busy person. Do you even have time to read for pleasure?
I sort of now listen, like my wife is in a book club. And so she will recommend a book to me and I will read, but I do a lot of podcasting. And I would say the last book I read was something from her book club. And I'm trying to remember the last thing he said to me.
Yeah.
I think what it was called, the book.
Laura Dave.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I listened to it. So, and that's always been the thing. Is it cheating if you're listening to audio, or is it reading? And I think it's reading. Somebody's reading it to you. It's like when you first fell in love with books when you were a kid and somebody was reading you a picture book, right? That was reading. I mean, you may not have been reading it yourself, but you are listening to a story.
It's very soothing. And I listen to only audiobooks now when I ride my bike every day because that's the only time I have to devour books like I used to in print. Now they're audiobooks, but it sounds like the person is telling you their story. You're hearing it in a narrator's voice that sounds like the protagonist in the novel. So it's actually very nice. But what I have found is I don't retain as much when somebody reads to me as when I read, in print. So I'll forget, the characters, or have to be reminded in my book club what actually happened. I enjoy the experience, but I don't retain as much.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I would agree with that. And plus, because I think sometimes when you're reading a book, you can also have a pencil and you might circle something or underline it. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that with audio. But I do find, like I used to love to read before I went to sleep rather than watch TV. Mm-hmm. And now I find that it puts me to sleep, no matter how good the book is. Yeah. So,
well, did you bring one of your books with you that you could read a passage from to let our listeners hear your work and tone of the book?
Absolutely. I did. I saw your notes to me, so I appreciate it because I probably maybe would not have. All right, so.
Can set it up. Tell us what's going on.
Okay, so this is a part in the book where, so the premise of the book is Jack Kelly. When you first are introduced to him, you meet him in his mid-40s, and he has 3 children, and one of them gets very sick, and he ends up in the hospital, and these shadow people appear in his son Stevie's room. And so he's trying to keep Stevie alive, and he's trying to keep them from getting to him. And what happens is he thinks he's protecting Stevie, and Stevie tells him, it's not fair. You have to decide if you're going to be with us or if you're going to be with Grandpa. And he's like, what are you talking about? Grandpa died a long time ago. And then he wakes up and he's in intensive care himself as his 13-year-old boy when he fell through a boarding house floor. And he wakes up, and first of all, they didn't think he was going to live. Then they don't think he's going to walk. and he can't get his wife, Catherine, his love of his life, and his 3 children out of his head. And the doctors get a psychiatrist and a neurologist, and they're all saying, no, this is because of your brain injury. You've never been married. You're only 13. So he starts to, even though he knows that it was real, that's where the Book of Souls, the name comes from, because he writes their name down in the Book of Souls, because he's like, well, if that never happened, they happened to me because they're the ones that kept me alive. So he gets back into his 13-year-old life with his father, and he does not have a mother, and he's in Catholic school, and he starts watching this man across the street who he doesn't realize it immediately, but is a ghost, and his name is Casper Greenstreet. And so this is when he actually really meets Casper Greenstreet. So he says, the man I saw earlier at the Michael's crypt suddenly stands a few feet from me. It is as if the crows have delivered him to me, or me to him. My instinct is to run. I am dealing with myth, a hoax, a superstition. But what do you call it when you see it, meet it, a spirit, a ghost that is alive and dead at the same time? My body and soul are not pleased. It is like getting hit with the coldest and hottest day of the year within seconds of each other, like the happiest emotion you may ever experience within a moment of your worst. I am frozen, but in some bizarre way, I expect him to introduce himself. You've been looking for me. Well, here I am. Casper Greenstreet is the man I've been watching from my classroom, but he looks much different up close. His complexion is ash. His wrists reveal his exit wounds, and blood appears to seep from them like a slow dripping faucet. What I feel is not fear. It is greater than that. None of the dead come back, but some stay.
Very nice. That makes us all want to run out and get that book. Tell us where people can find your work.
Well, the book is everywhere online. It's in a couple of local bookstores. I'm in Barnes & Noble at the Grove in LA. I'm at the Flint Ridge bookstore, but of course it's on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. You could get it at BookBub. Anywhere possibly online, you can get it. I think probably Amazon's the easiest, but we've made it available to all the small bookstores. So you can go into your local bookstore and they can just order it right through Ingram Spark. So yeah, we wanted to make it available to every reader and not somebody who just feels like it's their only outlet with the, Amazon. And it's also on audio.
Who is your narrator? Did you narrate the book?
I did not. I just didn't think, somebody said to me, why, you should narrate it. And I was like, I don't know. Did you narrate yours?
No.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
I don't like
right?
this Southern accent coming out in mine.
Oh, I love it. I love your Southern accent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just felt like I wanted somebody who's done it. And then when we were auditioning, we were like shocked and that was like the beauty of having like a book forward, because they orchestrated it all. They put it out there on ACX, and we had I want to say 101 people auditions. And then we found this one man actor, and he had this great booming voice that was, and we were ready to pull the plug with him. And they said, don't listen to any more, because we've already listened to 79 and, we've got this guy and he's great, and blah, 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 blah. And so I saw 3 more auditions. And I was like, I think I'll just listen to these 3 and then I'll be done. And then the guy, Luke Welland, I felt like he had Jack's voice as a 13-year-old, where the other guy had the voice that could, maybe do like the narrative part, but the story is mainly told from Jack Kelly as a 13-year-old who wakes up and he's hearing ghosts and he's seeing demons and he's hearing people's thoughts. And I just was like, okay, well, this kid is in Catholic school. How would this voice sound describing the nun in his classroom at 13, as opposed to the guy we eventually went with, because his voice seemed perfect for Jack at 13. So it was really hard because they were both so very different.
It's very fun to choose your narrator and to hear them read your words for the first time. And especially, I needed a female who had a Southern accent, but I didn't want it to be syrupy Southern accent. And when you ask for a Southern speaker, sometimes you get some gosh awful accents.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun and it's hard though, right? Because then when you pull the plug, you go, oh, okay, I hope I had the right voice, because somebody is going to be listening to that book for 11 hours and they have to like the voice.
True.
No matter what the words are saying, if they don't connect with the audio. So yeah, it was fun and difficult and exciting. And
Well, Kevin, our writers over 50 are such a unique set, as you well know. Do you have any advice for authors over 50 who might be writing their first book?
I wouldn't say advice, because I feel like I would say what my experience is and what you and I were talking about. If you have a story, or even if it's nonfiction and you want to, now's the time. Don't wait anymore. And you don't have to wait. It's not like the old days where you had these gatekeepers and you had to know somebody who knew somebody who could get your manuscript in, or you had to get an agent before they would even entertain the idea. The world is so open to us, and sit down and write. But make sure you're writing because you really want to, because it's not about how many sales you're going to have. It really is about the process, especially, I think, after 50, because, we're in winter, and, you want to make sure that what you're doing it out of love, I think.
And that's why I call it life's sweetest third. I think we still have a lot of sweetness left. And we're proving it every day as I celebrate all of you writers who are just happen to be over 50. So thank you so much for being with us today. We're pleased to have you as one of our authors over 50, and we wish you much success in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and a lot of fun. And this is the part I enjoy the most.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.